Karen Diemer. Well, yeah. She's going to update us a little bit on what's going on in the city. At her pleasure.
All right. Good morning.
Good morning.
So, you know, I do try to make rounds to just answer questions, to share, to give you a little bit of updates on what's happening with the city. But mostly I prefer to talk about things that are on your mind. So if you have questions, feel free to interrupt me at any time. And we can talk about whatever subject is on the collective minds.
Maria?
Yes. I'm Karen Diemer, city manager here in Arcata. And I've been with the city for 26 years, don't tell anyone. And in this role for the last 8. So I can tell you where a few things are buried, but Luke probably knows where more of them are buried. So, and we'll try to keep it mixed around ourselves. Okay, so a little bit of good news. This last, you know, what I share is that as we went into the pandemic, there were a lot of projects that were slowed. There were a lot of projects that were stopped. We didn't know where we would come out financially from the pandemic, but we did go into kind of serious finalization of a lot of planning. So as we come out of the pandemic, what you're seeing, complaining about, calling me about, is a lot of construction around town. A lot of sidewalks being ripped up, a lot of roads being repaired. And we really are coming out with a lot of projects that you will see in the next couple of years. The council has awarded, we have a new 1 million gallon water tank. Marty would love to be here today to hear about it and to share why that's super important in our community. I say water tanks are like maybe my favorite project of all time because they do all good things, right? They prepare us for emergencies. They certainly provide clean water. They support fire suppression. And they help us conserve energy because they allow us to not pump water when energy prices are really high. So they bring our, you know, try to solidify our rates the best we can as well. So we're adding 1 million gallons. It'll go in what we call zone 1, which is everything from basically the university and lower. So that's about 80% of the city, you know, the majority of what we do. And it'll be located out on the north end of town off of West End Road. So for those of us that really geek out on water infrastructure, that's exciting for us because it will be the first time that we could actually isolate a portion of the city and backfeed the rest of the city. If, say, we had a significant fire in the downtown, hopefully that won't happen ever again. But if we did, we could isolate one of those tanks to use for fire and not just blow through everything that we had. Or if we had a, you know, catastrophic emergency at some point, would allow us to better operate our system. So we have that, which will be under construction soon. We did just open bids for what we call phase 1 of our wastewater treatment plant. Those of you that have followed, we've been working for, I'll say in earnest 5 years, but in a lot of ways 10 years on a complete rehab of our naturalized wastewater treatment system. The biggest component of that is trying to get away from chlorine disinfection. We have for 35 years used chemical disinfection to take out the bacteria in our wastewater. That ultimately, even though we dechlorinate the water before it goes into the bay, that is actually just another chemical process. So there is still chemical residue that then goes into the bay. So we've been working to try to eliminate that from our system and move to ultraviolet UV light bulbs, basically, that the water will flow through to do that final disinfection. We opened bids, our engineer's estimate. So any of you that are doing any construction right now know that these are expensive. So engineer's estimate on this phase was 30 to 35 million. Our lowest bid came in at 41 million. We had 2 bids. Our second came in at 52. No, our lowest bid came in at 51 million. And our second came in at 60. So we do have a bid protest with the $10 million differential. So we'll try to work through that. Hopefully we won't need to rebid it. But even so, we are right on the precipice of getting this project off the ground. We have one final permit from the Coastal Commission, which will be hopefully obtaining here in September, and then we'll be ready to go for that. And moving away from chlorine is a huge goal for this community for a lot of years, and will be exciting. We also, so the prices are high. We did set rates, the last city council set rates for a 5-year period to fund all of these capital improvement projects. With cost escalation, those rates are not going to be nearly enough. But the good news is, if there was good news that came out of the pandemic, for whatever reason, the federal government really started funneling money back into infrastructure, and we are sitting in a perfect position. We've gotten notice from the State Water Resources Control Board. We were going to loan, basically take out loans to do all of this and then pay it back with over time. They've told us that they will convert upwards of $200 million into forgivable loans if we can get this money out the door in the next few years. So this community could not be sitting better. So when we heard that, we're like, well, what else can we do? We're not going to leave a penny of that unspent if it's not our money. So the council just last week also awarded a bid to do another 10 million in what we call inflow and infiltration. So it lines our sewer pipes. Our sewer pipes sometimes leak, but normally what they do is they absorb additional water from the groundwater, rainwater, or people just replumb their downspout sometimes into the sewer. And then it's very costly for us to treat all of that water when it comes down to the treatment plant. So when you hear people talk about how do we build capacity to grow in this community, and is our wastewater treatment plant going to be a component that would restrict growth? I say on the surface right now, we're at about half capacity of our treatment plant. Our dry weather summer flow is about 45%. Our wet weather is about 35% for the last couple of years, but we've also had very little rain. So what we do know is on years when we have a lot of rain, then our treatment plant can get a little overwhelmed. We bring in a lot of water from outside through pipes. So lining and fixing those pipes, one, protects the environment. Two, stops us from having to shut water off as we fix wastewater leaks throughout the town in the middle of the night. And three, does ultimately really build capacity for growth in our treatment plant because it reduces any of the unnecessary water coming in. So this will be the largest I&I project we've ever done. We did a 3-year project about 5 years ago starting. That was about 7 million. And we figured we gained we reduced about 500,000 gallons of water a day when we really had heavy I&I flow. So hopefully we'll garner at least that again. And that's quite a bit of capacity for us. Luke probably gives you updates on our community ambassador program. But nope, he doesn't.
He will not.
We're just getting going.
We're just getting going, yeah. So he's going to tell me if because people ask me about it. So one of the projects that the programs that the council funded with our rescue plan dollars or stimulus dollars was a 2-year pilot of what are called community ambassadors. And these are individuals that will be hired, and they're going to start as a pilot project in the downtown area. That will be just an extra set of eyes and ears on the ground and assistance to people that are shopping and dining and needing directions and needing advice here in the downtown area. So that program is going to fall under Luke's sergeant position to help coordinate what I tell people, and he's going to kick me from way over there if he needs to, but is that he has selected the first 6 that will be hired, and they are in background, and he's hoping to have them in training in September, and then hopefully by October, we should have them out in the downtown area and starting. So once you see them, I haven't seen their fancy vests, but I saw a bunch of stuff coming in from the mail, so I know he's gotten stuff, but they should be really recognizable. Do reach out and chat with them. A lot of them you'll know. I don't think I can say who they are yet, but, but we'll get them all through background, get them hired. You'll see them out on the street pretty shortly. Another one of the projects that the council funded with our stimulus funds was the safe parking program. Many of you probably saw when we announced that safe parking program was going to be on Snow Boulevard. A lot of other people came to just safely park there. Which I understand. I mean, there's a lot behind that, but we don't get to do things in secrecy in the city. We try to be transparent, but it also does then blend to some of that. So, but the program now, so really thanks to Luke and several of our team at APD, we're able to work with some of those individuals. The very last one, I think they actually code into the safe parking program, which is behind the fence. We have about 25 people in that program. They've moved about 4 into permanent housing so far. And it is really operating well inside the fenced area. There are a lot of families, students back in school. There are a lot of people that go to work every day that are staying in that region. And so it's a very expensive program to run. I don't know yet how we're going to continue to fund it, but we're going to keep looking for that. The intent was to try to build a set of data to show the state that this is a great entry tool for us to get individuals into permanent supportive housing, because the state does not fund this type of program. They don't fund, like 10 camping programs, except for the pandemic, so we trialed that when they said they'd fund anything. We're like, pick some parking lots. But what we do find is that there are a lot of people that are not willing to come into a permanent site, but are willing to come in, especially if they, keep their car, keep all their belongings, and then start to get wraparound services. So we've had some success in the program, but truthfully, there's just no way this community could fund it. It's costing us about $650,000 for a year. And that is just the cost of 24-hour staffing, right? I mean, you just have to have people there 24 hours a day for the environment to be safe for the people that are living in it. So that's the real cost of it. So we'll see, but it's nice to have that program and start to build some of that data. On the permanent supportive, should I stop for a second? I could go on 20 more topics, but okay.
I have a question on behalf of my friend who has to be driven across this road. Is there any plan to repave or fix M Street?
There was a big development that was going to come onto M Street. And are you talking about between like Alliance
11th and
Alliance? Yeah. I do think that M Street will ultimately get paved. I tend to think your friend will be very disappointed because cars are going to go very fast when it does.
Well, she lives on 11th, but we have to get her across.
But you have to get yeah. So cities do things a couple of ways. One, it's not a high traveled road right now because there's like 4 houses and bug grass, right? There's just not a lot there. So it doesn't tend to make the high priority list for when we're trying to fund roads that have a lot of traffic on them. But there is definitely things in the works around development in that M Street area. I am really.
You gotta wait for the gateway, Terry.
Yeah, when the gateway comes, it will be paved. A part of it, well, like half of it is good. I was just out there the other day because people have been talking about it. So we'll probably do some.
I see a lot of people walking. It looks like high school students because it's just
Right now, yeah. If you go and drop off or pick up time from the high school, it's a pretty popular road. So I'm walking with a group of those neighbors next week out there to take a look at M Street. It's a little too far from the high school to be included in the Safe Routes to School program. And we will probably get it on the paving schedule, but then I just know those poor neighbors are gonna be like, why is everyone going so fast? Like potholes really are good. And if you want to talk to a neighborhood about that, I mean, our office rang off the hook with people that really wanted buttermilk all the way up to the golf course. It was in such horrible condition, and now it looks really beautiful. And now they call me, even though there's speed feedback signs and roundabouts, and they're like, still, they'll go too fast. I'm like, yeah, that's what happens with paving. So careful what we wish for. I like good paving, and especially if you're a bicyclist in town. I mean, I think that's a lot of times, sometimes I think we should just really pave the bike lanes and leave the center. But everybody would run me out of town with that one. We also, on the permanent housing side, the council has supported 2 hotel conversions. We call it Project Home Key. These are monies that come from Gavin Newsom. Gavin Newsom will fund housing. If you will give him new units, not converting existing units, but new units of actual permanent housing, he will pay for it. So we are converting, the Red Roof Inn is being purchased by Danco. That is to close escrow this month, and they will be under construction the day after, or the day it closes escrow. They are ready to come in and start converting each of those hotel rooms into either single, double, or they've got a couple of suites that they'll put in for families for affordable housing. And then the Days Inn will be owned by Arcata House Partnership. So the grant actually purchases the facility, pays for the conversion of the facility, and then offers 5 years of support service for the facility. So it's a significant amount of hotel transition for this community. So if any of you want to be in the hotel business, we're really looking for people to build hotels because we also need hotels, right? We have expanding Cal Poly, we have lots of other business ventures that are going to be bringing folks to this area that need to fly in and visit, and we do need hotel space. But at the same time, we desperately do need housing. So we also, so speaking of just kind of housing in the university was short housing. So many of you have probably heard they've also leased a third hotel that's out in the Valley West area, the Comfort Inn, have 94 students that are being housed out there. It's a pretty fun vibe at the hotel, I have to say. And, another project that the council funded with their stimulus funds was community and neighborhood engagement in the Valley West neighborhood. And so that it's called CUNA, and that group has been doing some outreach to the student population, and they're going to be doing a big welcome barbecue. And we're going to open up, if any of you have seen, we've done some artwork. We had a little bit of money in the budget with the CUNA budget that they decided to do a participatory budget process with that neighborhood to see what would you really like if we just had, you know, $10,000 or $20,000, what would you do with that? And part of what they really wanted was to see some art and some upgrades around the basketball court. So we just finished all of those projects. So they'll be doing a small ribbon cutting for those projects and a barbecue for the new students to try to engage them in the neighborhood out there, which is great. Speaking of Valley West and money, so we've been looking for money during the pandemic, and fortunately we've just been really successful. We just are learning, actually the press release will go out today at noon, that we've received a second grant for Carlson Park. So Carlson Park is the only parcel in the entire city of Arcata that touches the Mad River. We acquired that from Caltrans. They purchased the property for mitigation from Ken and Ellen Zanzi several years ago. They completed their mitigation and then transferred the property to the city. There is about 1 acre of upland that will put active recreation, playground, play sport court. Folks want a restroom out there, and then a non-motorized boat launch into the Mad River and walking trails. And so we had one grant that we received for sort of the naturalized upgrades to that, that we already had. And just this week, we've heard that we were one of 12 rural recreation grants in the state that will receive about another $700,000. And then I do have one more secret $1 million funds that will be coming to that site, hopefully in September. So we should have $2 to $2.5 million to put into that site, which is tremendous. So that will be a complete game changer out in the Valley West area. So we have a lot of good things going on. What other questions do we have?
We're gonna get by without some gateway questions.
Okay,
I have two. One, the first one is I'm reading everything I can see about the gateway just to see what's all planned out there. But it seems like from hell or high water, they're going to build 8-story buildings. I mean, they don't want they want to hear what your opinions are, but I think they're going to build 8-story buildings. Sure looks like they're just going.
Okay, yes, they want to hear what your opinion is.
We're going to build those anyway.
And the city will never build an 8-story building, right? The city will not. So this is all private sector. The city doesn't own an inch of property in the gateway. And the question becomes for people is how can we build housing and what values or amenities do we want to continue to see? I would say what I heard, the council had a study session with the planning commission this week, and I heard a pretty straight split between above 6 stories and not, you know. I would say 8 stories, I would have given that a 50-50 split. 6 stories, I'd say took about 75% of the crowd on the favorable side, and then there was probably at least 25% that were 4-story or more.
Okay, secondarily, I hear him talking about the reason we're building this is because we need room for students, we need room for traveling nurses, we need room for this and that. How do we keep those from just being totally filled up with an influx of people moving out of the city to a nice rural area in a small little, you know, somebody retires and takes that up, and all we do is increase the population of the town. You can't, I don't think you can constrain who buys those units to people that happen to live in this area.
You can't restrict the marketplace, you know, that type of housing. What you can do is try to create a mix of affordable units, of rental units, of home ownership opportunities at different income levels. And so I think that's where the real hard work becomes in our infill planning. And then there are ways, we are working with industries, we are working with people in the healthcare industry to build their workforce housing, right? So when we think about doctors and nurses and PAs and X-ray technicians coming to this area, our healthcare providers, Open Door, Providence, have real interest in making sure they have workforce housing. So we are working specifically with them on them developing their own units that would be able to.
That they would own and control.
They would own and control.
Okay.
So you can find some unique ways to do that, but the truth is, just like we all wanted to move here and love to be here, there are a lot of others that are looking at fire-ridden areas or, you know, congested areas that cannot telework that also want to be in this area. I'm happy to share a slide with you. It's on several of the Gateway videos as well, that shows the population of Arcata over the last 30 years. And you look at how we do sort of connect with the university, and then you see where it starts to decouple. You see a period of time where the university population increases, like 2010 to 2015. And we saw it. There was not a single rental in Arcata, and those students pushed out. They pushed out to McKinleyville and to Eureka. And then all of a sudden you see this huge downturn in the university population from a high of about 8,500 in 2015, 16 to this last year at 5,800. I mean, that's a tremendous drop off in student population. And you would have expected to see a drop off in Arcata population in that period. What we saw was the exact opposite. We saw the highest percentage rate of increase in our population that we've seen in the last 30 years. We've seen that in the last 5. So this graph kind of goes together. The university comes up, the university crashes, but the Arcata population soars. You've got this huge delta between those two. That is what the students are feeling, trying to move back here now to refill some of those spaces at the university of not being able to find housing. So they've already come. A lot of that population has already come.
And they're gonna, well, it seems like that's one of the real issues that people have to talk about. Are we just, you know, gonna make a flat increase of 3 or 4,000 population per Arcata? And what are those effects? Because I just would assume they're gonna come from all over.
Yeah, and you'll see if you look through, we had it on the slides from the study session. Most of the study session is audio because it's hard to do Zoom in a room like this per se, you know, and we've got different tables talking. But there is another slide that talks about where would we see that growth. And about 18% of that is probably in the Gateway. 25% of that growth is going to be on campus housing, right? Between or off campus, but campus owned housing. So they're looking at just under 1,950 beds for the Craftsman Mall project. They've got another at least 1,500 beds over time that will be built on campus. So there will be a tremendous amount of that growth that happens right on campus owned properties. But then there is also 5 other upzone areas in our general plan update under consideration right now in the Northtown area, the downtown area, out near St. Louis and Spear Avenue. So there are a lot of other areas where we would see upzoning and higher density housing. And then we still do have some vacant, and we have a lot of space for what we used to call mother-in-law units that are now fancily called ADUs, accessory dwelling units. But that is a good source of increase in terms of housing in this area. If I was just to guess in 20 years what our population would be, you know, somebody will hold me to this in 20 years, but I would guess that we will be right around 25,000. So that could be scary, or that could be like, oh, not so bad. It depends on who I talk to, but realistically, if we had housing to support that, I think our model will show us at about 27 with the bump in Cal Poly and then that kind of leveling off. But I would guess more realistically we'll come in a little bit under that in that 20-year period. And it won't happen overnight.
What are we now?
We're just under 19.
Third.
Yeah. Other questions? Questions about Gateway?
Did you have a question?
No. Yeah, so the Gateway, for any of you that haven't, we probably have 10 hours of different types of videos that you can learn about infill development and what that looks like. And what I've learned, I would say in the last 6 months, is that if I polled all of you right now and just said, how many of you would want 8-story buildings in Arcata? Not a single hand would go up. You guys did so well in my exercise this morning. But when you start to look through the difference between covering that whole area west of K Street with 4-story buildings, or trying to say, okay, for that, and let's just say that gave us 1,000 units. For those same 1,000 units, if I took 6 of those buildings up to 5 stories, 2 of them up to 6 stories, and 2 of them up to 8 stories, I could now have 4 acres of linear park and open space, right? Instead of it all just being covered. And if you told me that after 3 stories, you were gonna set that back like 15 feet, so when I'm actually standing there, all I see is 3 feet above, or 3 stories above me, that look and feel is really different. Like there's a lot that you can do architecturally that doesn't create what you see actually in Sorrel Place. That's 4 stories straight, all sides, right up from the sidewalk. But there are architectural things that you can do to reduce that massing to your community's aesthetic. And that's the detail that I think this community needs to get to, and that's the code that we can create. And that right now, that we call it form-based code, and that code, if we had it, right now is something that the state will honor. I will promise you that Gavin Newsom wants housing. And I will promise you he will continue to strip our ability to control our own development if we don't do it ourselves. And the way we do that is to try to come up creatively with what we want that development to look like. And we put that in a code and we tell developers this is what we want. And then they have certainty. If I build to this code, I will be accepted and appreciated. And I won't spend, I mean, the village, better or worse, I bet they were into that close to $2 million to walk away. Right? Developers aren't going to do that. Right? So the idea is to tell you this is what we want, come and build it, and it will build that look and feel, and the state won't strip that away from us. So it's hard. These are not easy conversations, and I really do encourage you to get involved because this will shape the look and feel of Arcata for probably the next 30 years. So yeah, check it out. On our website, we've got a whole YouTube page with lots of videos on form-based code and what strategic infill can look like. Other questions? I don't know what kind of time I have.
No more questions. We'll have you